Did you know that exploring your local history and community heritage and hidden neighbourhood secrets could be one of the most powerful and underused tools for mental health and well-being? In this episode of Peace Unplugged, we're going to look at the science behind why knowing where you come from helps understand who you are. So welcome again to Peace Unplugged, the podcast that explores the people and the places and the forgotten stories. And these are items that shape who we are and how we think. So I'm going to ask the question, can learning the history about the place where you live actually make you healthier? The answer, of course, is backed by some science. And this science is about reducing anxieties, building some resilience, and for fighting away at loneliness that creeps into some people's lives. So researching, that's local histories and legacies and hidden secrets in the community. All of these have measurable mental health benefits. So I thought we'd just look at some examples. Right now, some would say that we're living through a bit of a loneliness crisis in this country, and probably worldwide. The World Health Organization has declared that loneliness is a major public health issue. And since 2023, WHO have made it a bit of a priority to address. Their studies have showed that chronic loneliness carries health risks compared to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. That's from research from Holt-Lundstadt et al. 2015, Perspectives on Psychological Science. So in towns and cities across the world, people live side by side, but they can also feel completely invisible. You know how it is. We share the streets, the parks and the pubs and the public squares with thousands of other people, and yet most of us know very little, next to nothing, about the land that we're walking on, the layers of living history beneath our feet. Without a felt connection to the place where we reside, it's very difficult to feel connected to the whole place. And it's also very difficult to feel connected to the people that live around us. Essentially, we have the danger of becoming strangers in our own neighbourhood. There's research published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology. That's Lewicker 2011. It found that something called place attachment, that's a psychological bond to a specific location. And it's one of the specific predictors of community belonging and also of subjective well-being. It's thought that people who actively engage with local history score significantly higher on measures of belonging and connectiveness. Simply learning about the history of your local corner shop, or that you discover that a local road name is linked to somebody in history locally. That's when we realise that the place becomes ours in a much deeper way. We belong to it and it belongs to us. Recently, I've been doing this very thing, investigating into local history. And that's been linked to planning applications to the local area and to the planned sale of farmland locally, which may or may not go ahead. That was a previous podcast I did about Henry Robinson. And it's inspired me to look at other local historic figures who are not particularly well known, but do have an interesting history. Now, returning to the well-being element of this podcast, it's known that anxiety disorders are the most common mental health issues globally, and they're known to affect at least 301 million people worldwide. That's from the World Health Organization from 2023. It stated that one of the core features of chronic anxiety is that fragile state of ourselves feeling unstable, a feeling of not really knowing who we are or where we fit into the world. It's thought that modern life often erodes our identity. The digital culture that we're engaging in now, well, it's borderless and it's fast moving. Social media constantly reframes everything. We're inundated with global information constantly, and thereby we can lose touch with the knowledge of local issues. This is what psychologists refer to as identity diffusion. It's a scattered sense of self, and it leaves us vulnerable to all kinds of anxiety issues. Psychologist Dan McAdams from 2001 introduced the concept of narrative identity. That's the idea that we construct a stable sense of self by weaving our personal story into a larger, meaningful narrative. Researching local history provides exactly that. For instance, it could be that you discover that an ancestor, perhaps a great-grandfather or great-grandmother, fundraised for a local building such as a local library, or that your neighbourhood survived some World War II blitz, perhaps, and the history of how those buildings were rebuilt. It's essentially a story that's larger than our own. A study by Routledge et al. 2011 in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology demonstrated that nostalgia, including engagement with community and cultural history, significantly buffered anxiety by strengthening self-continuity. The local history is not just backward-looking. It's actually a psychological anchor towards the present. One of the most overlooked dimensions of mental wellness is something called epistemic curiosity. That's the joy and drive of wanting to learn new things. You see, curiosity is directly associated with lower rates of depression and also linked to greater life satisfaction. It gives us some psychological resilience. That research comes from Kashtan et al. 2004, the Journal of Research in Personality. The problem we've got these days is that our modern returns kill that curiosity. We take the same routes to work, we eat at the same places, we scroll through the same feeds. It gets to the point where every day feels indistinguishable from the others. We slip into what psychologists call hedonic adaptation. That can relate to the inability to feel pleasure or interest. Have you ever felt that time in your life when everything feels a bit grey and repetitive and there's no surprises? This is where discovering hidden secrets of local history genuinely therapeutic. It might be if you live in the UK, you'll discover that perhaps the city where you live has those underground Victorian sewers, and that they were once toured, would you believe, by royalty. Or it might be a seemingly very ordinary-looking field was the site of a medieval market, and these things are often discovered by archaeological digs. These things trigger the same neurological pathways as any other pleasurable discovery. That information is from somebody called Charan Nagarath, 2023, Why We Remember. It explains that novelty and curiosity activate the dopamine within our body. It makes our memories seem more vivid and we get more positive emotions. Local history exploration, particularly uncovering those hidden and often forgotten stories, well, it's a form of directed curiosity practice that's low cost and high return for our mental health. And it's hiding in plain sight. There's lots of cities around that run structured urban exploration and heritage trails, and they're designed specifically to help people with mental health. And the evidence is that it significantly reduces elements of depression. And that's from a report, Heritage and Society, 2019. Another link to mental health issues. It's grief. And grief, as we know, is universal. Yet it's one of the most poorly supported mental health experiences in our modern culture. So whether that's the loss of a person, a relationship, a community, or just a sense of safety, that unprocessed grief sits at the root of vast amounts of long-term mental health issues. It's thought that complicated grief affects approximately 10% of bereaved people, and it is, of course, associated with depression, PTSD, as well as our physical health. Again, that's lifted from Shear, 2015, New England's Journal of Medicine. Our culture, to a large extent, lacks the ability to deal with grief effectively. Lots of communities have lost those rituals and shared stories and the collective memory. Those things are what gave grief a little bit of structure and meaning. When there's nowhere to place loss, it becomes isolating. People grieve alone. They'll grieve without context, and they'll grieve without the sense of what loss really is. It's part of something larger. So, researching local legacies Perhaps war memorials, community archives, oral histories, they can be a profound solution to dealing with grief. This apparently is sometimes called commemorative meaning making, the process by which placing personal loss within a larger historical narrative reduces its psychological weight. And that was a landmark study by Park 2010, Psychological Bulletin. When a bereaved person discovers, for example, that a local war memorial carries the name of somebody from their family, or that a street is named after a historical figure who perhaps overcame extraordinary hardship, it connects private grief to a public legacy. There's several UK bereavement charities. They include Cruise Bereavement Care, and they've incorporated local heritage visits and archive research into the therapeutic support, and this is known to reduce the grief symptoms. So look out for further podcasts from me, where I intend to be investigating a lot more of local history, of local figures. It really is a fascinating subject. Now, mental health issues don't only exist at our own individual level, they're also linked to community well-being too. And that's what's often referred to as social capital. It determines how resilient we can be as individuals when we work within the community, especially when we're facing adversity. It's thought that areas with high social capital recover much better and faster from things like economic shock, pandemics, and natural disasters. And that's from an article by Putnam called Bowling Alone from the year 2000. It appears social capital is declining. Digital platforms have replaced many of the physical, community-rooted interactions that historically built it. Now, local knowledge, the shared stories, the community landmarks, the unwritten rules of a neighbourhood, these are gradually disappearing with each generation passing by. It's why it's so important to preserve some of these historical places. Research by Corcoran et al. 2020 Urban Studies found that communities with active local heritage engagement, including local history groups, archive projects, and community storytelling initiatives, demonstrate significantly higher levels of trust and collective efficacy that demographically similar communities without them. So collective memories, it turns out, it's not just merely sentimental, it's an infrastructure for mental health. When people know the shared story of where they live, how their community perhaps survived floods, how the community builds its institutions, how the community champions them, well, that implies confidence that the community around us could survive and adapt. Local history research in this light is community therapy. So the conclusions here I'm suggesting is that we spend so much energy searching for well-being in our lives. That's sometimes in distant places, going off on holiday, in retreats, in apps on our phone, engaging in self-help programs. Yet we miss that one of the most positive and powerful tools we have lies literally beneath our feet and also behind some of the buildings that we pass by every day. Your town, your village, or your city have stories that are waiting to be told. I suggest that you listen in. You might find something unexpected, particularly for yourself. Thank you for watching and listening in again today to Peace Unplugged. I hope that perhaps you'll consider looking into local history around you, and that enabling you the ability to share that information with other people, with the community, and to explore together. It may help to build new positive relationships, not only with people around us, but with people from the past, and perhaps the links we may all have regarding that. So until the next time, stay curious. Look out for more of my podcasts. If you're from the district where I live in Thanet, then you'll find some of those podcasts I'm going to do on local people from history might well interest you. Bye for now.